Well, good morning and good afternoon, depending on wherever in the world you're joining us from. We are so thrilled to have you with us today. My name is Rep Buttle. I am the Executive Director of the Small Business Roundtable, and we are really thrilled today to present the second in a series of 4 or 5 webinars that Small Business Roundtable is doing with PayPal to really focus on helping small business owners and entrepreneurs across the United States and quite frankly across the world during the COVID-19 crisis. As most of you know, in America, small business owners are the bedrock of our economy. They create 2 out of every 3 jobs, and we know how essential they are during this time, as well as we work to come out of the crisis in a more equitable way. Small Business Roundtable is a leading coalition of small business advocacy organizations across Washington. We have 8 national members, and all of their members touching close to 50,000 small business owners across the country. And we've been pleased to partner with PayPal over the last 2 or 3 years as they've promoted Small Business Month and really putting a highlight on the importance of small business owners and the importance the important role that they play in the economy. This year's a little different. We took our operations online, and last week we had a conversation around financial security. Today we're thrilled to have a conversation around digital strategy and digital payments. And also want to just sort of preview for folks that we're going to have additional webinars. We have one coming up for leadership during times of crisis next week, and we're also hoping to do one focused on diversity and minority business in the coming weeks. So watch your email inboxes for that. But today I'm just so thrilled. We're joined by amazing experts from across the country to have a conversation about something that is so critically important, which is digital strategy and digital payments. And before we hop into the conversation with the expert, it is my pleasure to turn the conversation over to Paul, who's with the PayPal team, who's going to greet us with some opening remarks. So Paul, over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Rhett. And thanks to Small Business Roundtable for partnering with us on some of these great webinars. You know, we just really value the partnership and, you know, just love the opportunity to connect directly with small business owners. For PayPal, small businesses are really a part of our DNA. We see it as a responsibility and a key pillar to our business, not only to support small businesses, but really expand opportunity to the underserved as part of our larger mission of financial inclusion. Small businesses are obviously facing just an unprecedented crisis right now. As a pivotal part of the health of the overall economy, it's so important for us to all come together to support entrepreneurs, both in the immediate, but also in the long-term recovery. A consequence of all of the lockdowns that we've been seeing across the country has been the need for small businesses to adapt and really meet customers where they are, which is online. There's been a tremendous acceleration from physical to digital, really in all forms during this time. Our CEO at PayPal, Dan Schulman, estimated recently that the population will take a leap of 3 to 5 years in the adoption of electronic commerce and digital payments. And we're really starting to see some of those early results already on our platform. In April, that may have been one of our biggest months in history. Almost 7.5 million new customers joined our platform. And more so than that, the number of daily active users has also increased by 20% to 40%, which is just an amazing number. And in the next quarter alone, we've estimated that we'll add 15 million to 20 million new customers. So we're really seeing this trend of customers, you know, shifting to digital commerce and the need for small businesses to make that transition as well. And if they already are online, optimizing their digital presence. And at PayPal, we really feel this responsibility, again, to ensure that that transition for small businesses is seamless by removing any friction and simplifying and securing the adoption of digital commerce. We recently launched a QR code feature in our PayPal app that allows merchants to safely collect contactless payments in person. We've also recently launched the PayPal Commerce platform, which pulls together all of our digital merchant solutions into one easy to manage system, from accepting payments to paying vendors to streamlining operations and accelerating growth. But we know that we're not able to do everything on our own. We really value the partnerships that we have with other digital companies to help small businesses optimize their digital presence. And right now, that is more important than ever. And we know that this crisis will have long-term effects on our economy, our communities, our small businesses, and we at PayPal are just extremely committed and focused on helping entrepreneurs weather that storm. Again, not just in the immediate, but also in the long road to recovery, because we know that lots will need to get done. So again, thank you to Small Business Roundtable for convening this event and this panel. I'm really excited for a great discussion. And with that, I'll hand it back to Rhett.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for your partnership for the last few years. Thank you for doing this now during COVID. And Paul's actually not going anywhere. He's going to stay with us just in case some questions come up on the PayPal side. But now I would love to turn the conversation to our amazing panelists and do some introductions of them. Before we hop into the conversation, I do want to let folks know we want to try to make this as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, if you look over into your box, which for most people is on the right side of your screen, but not always, there is a chat function, and would encourage you all to chat with us during the conversation so that we're getting your feedback live. But also please use that as a place to give us your questions during this conversation, and that way when we move to sort of open question and answer at the end of the conversation today, we can make sure that we're appropriately addressing your questions. And if we don't get to everyone's questions today, which sometimes happens, never our intention, we of course are going to be available to you afterwards and online to make sure you get connected today. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our amazing panel. We had a prep call yesterday, and it was a great conversation to start thinking about what we could turf up for you all. So first, farthest on the left side of the screen there is Aram Nadjarian. Aram is the founder of Mozaic Media and Communications, as well as the CEO of the NextGen Chamber of Commerce. He will also be joined by Margaret Brown, who is the CEO of SocializeLA, and also handles communications for NABO, the National Association of Women Business Owners. Thrilled to be joined as well by Alan Gannett, who's the author of The Creative Curve and a very prominent tech entrepreneur. And then finally, but definitely not least, Emily Griesing, who's the CEO of Bossible. So with that, I wanted to go ahead and hop into a conversation, and as we talked about yesterday, would just love our panelists to hop in anywhere. But Aram, I'm wondering if you can kick us off, because I think a community who's been particularly impacted by the COVID crisis has been our brick and mortar businesses. And I'm just wondering if you've been thinking about in your work about some useful tools and methods and resources for that community in particular, and how they should be thinking about reaching customers in new ways using digital. And Aram, I think you're on.
Thank you so much, Rhett.
And Aram, I think you're on.
Am I on? All right, thank you. Thanks so much, Rhett, and thanks everyone, Small Business Roundtable, PayPal, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a small business owner myself, adapting to COVID-19, like many of you on the webcast and my colleagues here on the panel. And I really tried to build a business with a forward-looking perspective on digital tools. Having some remote team members, we use productivity software to seamlessly connect across states and time zones. And I frankly haven't sent a paper check to an employee in years, but it's something that I think a lot of people listening are looking to immediately get into if they're not already there. I think many businesses may not be online yet, but virtually all of their customers are. And we also know that people online are generally receptive to hearing from trusted brands, particularly at this time, but as long as the message is authentic. And I think my main message there is that the authenticity of the message, no matter the online tool that you use, and there are so many that are fantastic and they're cost effective, especially in light of COVID-19, many companies have stepped up, right, to offer their existing services at reduced rates, special discounts, special deals, to really bring that business owner into the realm and make it realistic and possible for them to go online. And I think as a result of that, people are quickly adopting and adapting to this new normal, as a lot of us are talking about. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next several months.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aram. Margaret, I wanted to go to you next. We were talking a little bit yesterday about how, some of your clients and businesses you work with are sort of in that process of becoming more digital, and how COVID is just sort of pushed accelerate. And I was wondering, can you speak a little bit to that, what you're seeing across the country with business owners you work with? What are the tips that you would give folks who've joined us today who maybe were starting the process of becoming more digitally friendly, but are now living in this new world?
Yeah. Well, we have to remember that digital is, not just the marketing of our business, but it touches every arm, your sales, your customer service, the whole shebang. Everything has a component that could be digitized and made easier for yourself and your customer. And it's almost an expectation. And so I'd like to just focus on a less traditional digital business, which is a asphalt company up in Seattle. And, they're very successful. If they went with business as usual, they probably wouldn't have too many issues. But we have been able to, through just some digital processes, improve their referral program, how they partner with other small businesses in the area. And in turn, their success has now branched out to the success of others. So as they're flexing their influence, it's not just for themselves and their employees, it's impacting states, the neighboring states. So that's just one way. And I won't get into the tech, but it's out there. But yeah, I would just say that it's an expectation for all of us to have something that allows our customers and clients to connect with us online. So whether it is you host events online, I mean, you've seen it, gyms, bakers, everybody is hosting some type of an online event. And you might think, oh, well, someone's already doing it in my industry. That is like the greatest myth. And I know my marketers here will say the same thing. Just because someone else is already out on Facebook Live, it doesn't mean that you don't need to be there too. They need to hear your voice. Otherwise, why would you be in business? Because, you might say, well, I'm not going to be in business because there's competition. So they need to know you exist in order for them to do business with you. So that's two ends of the spectrum. But I would just say that it's an expectation. And now is the time, if you haven't already, to just start thinking about ways, or maybe contact a trusted partner to see if they can help you figure this out.
It's helpful. Alan, I wanted to go to you next, and I know you're not able to join us via the video cam today, but I know we have you by voice and we have your picture up on the screen. I know that you've done a lot of thinking about the right time to start a business and when, and probably you've been thinking about the way in which COVID has shaped digital strategy, just given your experience starting your own business, working with Fortune 100s, and now writing a book about some of these things. What are your thoughts about where we are and this moment for business owners and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. And of course, the recovering software CEO, can't get his webcam to work, which is a classic story. It's a time as old as tales old as time. But I'm really glad to be here. So I think the thing that's really important to understand is that when these trends happen, and we're talking about this obviously in the start with the PayPal data, when trends happen, certain things can accelerate trends, right? And what we're seeing right now is something that's accelerating trends. And so that means, for example, that everyone's sort of getting familiar with how to use digital payments. Going forward, if you're a restaurant, there's going to be pressure to accept digital payments even when you're back into an offline world, right? And so I think the fundamental thing people think about right now is think about what's happening now as a catalyst for the existing trends that were already occurring, right? These are things that we hopefully were already planning for, but if we weren't, now there's sort of an outsized reward for getting on the train sort of better late than never, right? And so that's the way I think about this, is really about just making the current trends even faster in a way that we have to react to.
Yep. That makes sense. Emily, I wanted to see if you could get like a little bit tactical with us, which is, you know, for the business owners listening today, I mean, what should they be communicating to their customers about digital? How should they be using digital? I know you've been doing some writing on this. Do you have thoughts on that folks should be thinking about?
Absolutely. So I just want to start with right now. I mean, I'm constantly looking up what is open and what I have access to, and I'm sure we all are. And I've been really shocked at how many businesses either are not acknowledging COVID-19 on their any digital platforms at all, or it's very limited or sparse. So I think for starters, no matter what your business, brick and mortar, or, you know, I'm professional services, is when someone goes to your site or your social media, as well as Yelp or Google other review sites that people are using to check on what's going on, is, you know, some of the basics, really just starting with, have your hours shifted? Are you no longer taking people inside your business? Are you doing deliveries now? Just really basic logistics so that people even know that you're still going. Are you still even open? So I think that's really, like, it seems so obvious, but I've noticed it so in such a big array. Some businesses that are really great at letting you know exactly what's going on, when they're planning to change things, and others that you're like, I have no idea unless I drive by this business what's going on with it. So I think for starters, you know, no matter what your industry is, that's really the most important, to have that be very consistent across any way that someone would reach you. And then secondly is sort of, we're being inundated with so much information right now, as we've all been talking about, and not to discourage everyone from doing so, but rather doing it in a way that's effective and helpful. So really, you know, what are you doing right now that is helping and adding to the conversation? So from, you know, are you a larger organization that's making donations to things in your community? Are you giving some type of payment plan to people that you serve? You know, what are you doing to actually meet the needs that people have right now? So rather a just sort of sale mentality, like what's additive that you're doing, and how can you convey that through those various channels? So I'd say those are really the two main ones that I would advise for businesses.
That makes a ton of sense. Aram and Alan, I want to come back to you on trends. Aram, I want to hear a little bit about trends that we're seeing with this next gen population. Alan, I want to hear about trends from you more broadly. But before I do that, I wanted to touch on digital payment, because I know we've been talking a lot about sort of the digital side. Margaret, I know you've had some experience with digital payments platforms with some work that you've been doing, and Emily, I know the same. Wanted to open it up to you to just hear, you know, how people should be thinking about digital payment right now in this moment where we're not having as much in human interaction. Hey, Margaret, I think you might be on mute, maybe.
Thank you.
No worries.
It goes back to the 101. Like, we can't resist anymore. We can't hesitate. There's got to be, you know, that even now a contactless payment. Like, and this is even before COVID, but how many of us have forgot our wallets? And it's like, you have Apple Pay, you have PayPal, you're good. You're good to go. You don't even need your wallet. And so, and it sometimes is the matter of someone doing business with you and not. So that should be like the decision maker right there. But without meaning to do research, I realized that even just selling my own products, I realized that having a payment form, you know, with all the security details, people still choose a PayPal name over a regularly putting in their credit card. Now, I have not gone to them and said, why did you choose PayPal, for the convenience or the security? But the truth of the matter is that sometimes people do feel more secure, or sometimes they just crave that convenience. So whatever that convenience is, as far as your digital payments go, it's got to be something that you're implementing. And you're seeing more and more businesses even go to zero cash. Mm-hmm. And we are not a cashless society. So I think that's a big decision to make. But at the same time, having those digital payments with that security level is, again, it is a trigger in someone's mind when they are making a sale, especially a new customer, is this something that I want to purchase? So it's just that level of security. I hope that helps.
No, I think it's helpful. And Emily, I'd like to hear your perspective. And after Emily, I'm going to encourage Aram and Alan to jump in. But I guess, my big question is, I mean, do you, out of every crisis, hopefully comes some good. And, I'm just wondering the panel's thoughts on, I mean, do you think COVID could be the thing that really pushes the US to accelerate digital payments? And, I've been in other countries before. Some of them are leaps and bounds ahead of us in terms of their digital payment infrastructure. It's a second thought. And, in particularly in the work that we do with a lot of communities of color, we know access to capital is an issue for minority entrepreneurs, diversity entrepreneurs, and digital payments accelerates a lot of that as well. And so, Emily, do you have thoughts? And then Aram and Alan, if you want to hop in on this as well. So, Emily, to you.
Absolutely. And Margaret made very good points in terms of sort of the reputability of PayPal and other digital payment platforms, as well as ease. Those are huge and those haven't changed. What has changed is the safety issues around payment. So especially if you're doing anything that's in person in a brick and mortar store or delivery, is the less that we can be exchanging credit cards and cash physically between one another, the better. That's just a fact of the reality we're now living in. So just simply from, following government guidelines, the more we can reduce that sort of exchange, the better. And of course, for people's employees who are going to be dealing with it more than anyone else, not just the customers, but also your team members. And again, there are, the issue of going cashless is controversial, and that's not for this discussion. But I think certainly you absolutely should have the option to pay in a variety of different ways for ease and for safety. And you had mentioned in other countries, Rhett, and I've seen this as well, that even just using credit cards that you only hold directly up to the machine, rather inserting or swiping, is also a way that's a lot more seamless to use. So that's becoming a lot more prevalent elsewhere, and hopefully we'll be able to adapt here as well to give people as many options as possible to pay you as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think, Rhett, this is Alan. I think one thing to think about too, as different states are reopening, is people are also going to be thinking a lot about their sort of physical interactions and in your store. And obviously, as Emily was talking about, like digital provides an option where you're not touching a touchpad, you're not signing a pen on a receipt. And I think that for a lot of us, one thing to think about is like, what is the sort of fraud risk we want to take relative to the sort of risk of someone being like, I just not going to buy it because I know they're going to make me sign with a pen and I don't know where that pen's been. And I think those are going to be really real fears. And I think it's worth thinking about your strategy as, how do I get paid by my customers, and how do I do that if I'm a brick and mortar store? How do I do that in a way that makes people feel comfortable? Because if they're not comfortable to give you money, they're not going to walk in the door.
Yeah, that's
helpful. And
helpful.
to jump off of what Alan said, Rhett, actually, some research that I had found, a Gallup poll as of mid-April stated that 62% of Americans said they were more likely to continue to use curbside pickup at stores once business closures and social distancing ends. And 71% said they'd continue to order medicine or medical supplies via delivery. So I think that right there demonstrates, it's like you've created a monster, but in many ways you had to do it. And now a lot of your customer bases are going to become used to it. And so I think it's going to change the way that service delivery from, well, if we say farm to table, but in this sense, in a restaurant business, from start to finish until that endpoint happens, will change. And another interesting thing that off of Emily, what Emily was talking about before, another Gallup poll talked about only 2 years ago, 68% of business owners said that e-commerce had no effect on their business, no effect. And so things change fast and businesses have to adjust. But I think when you're talking about millennials and Gen Zers, they spend nearly 50% as much time shopping online each week, about 6 hours, than their older counterparts do, 3 to 4 hours. So they're already online. And I think now you're looking at other generations of business owners and individuals trying to play catch up and trying to meet them where they are and even exceed their expectations, because people see the type of service offerings and the accuracy and the speed and efficiency at which transactions are happening, maybe by millennial and Gen Z business owners, so that now their expectations are that the entire marketplace is going to be doing that. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming months and into next year.
It's super helpful. I promised we'd save like 15 minutes for questions, but I do and I think we have about 15 more minutes of conversation, but I wanted to sort of open up a broad theme. And Alan, I hope we can kick us off here. I think what everyone on the line and everyone who's going to watch this after is really wondering is like, what does the new world look like, right? Is this going to stay with us? This push towards doing everything digitally, you know, as we begin to reopen, what is the long-term impact and trends of COVID? What is this starting, right? Is this 6 months? Is it a year? Are we changed forever? What does that look like? And I know we're all not futurists on the phone, but I think, you know, those of us who've been thinking about digital and digital strategies probably have been doing some thinking about this. And so wanted to open up a cross-cutting conversation on that. Alan, do you have thoughts to kick us off?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally when you think about your small business right now, you have in many ways a bigger opportunity than ever before, right? If you think about all the ability through e-commerce and through shipping and digital technology, you can be like, I, for example, this is like a very weird nerdy thing. So like no one judge, but you're all gonna judge. I make an omelet every single morning, and I'm very serious about this omelet making. And I've read this article about how the best omelet pan ever crafted is made by this small business in Boston. And so I went online and I ordered this one, and it turns out they have this thriving international business selling this bizarrely well-reviewed omelet pan, right? And it's a woman, and she does it literally out of her garage, but it's a pretty successful small business. And so I think one of the things we have to think about is maybe as things come back online, maybe sort of traditional retail is permanently down 10, 20%. But if your world that you're selling to is now sort of literally the entire world, that is actually an opportunity for you. So I think it's about, in some ways, changing our mindsets and thinking about things like our physical spaces as potentially more, they're showrooms, they're places for us to take photos of our content, they're places for us to store stuff, right? Maybe until our leases are up and we get something smaller. And so I think there's a mindset shift that can maybe reframe this as, okay, there's a lot of opportunity here.
Margaret, I see you nodding on mute, so I wanted to invite you into the conversation. What did Alan say that sort of resonated with you?
It is the fact that, I love retail, but this living online is not new to me. This is the way I've lived pretty much the entire length of my business, 11 years. My team is all across the country, and I am a consumer that really consumes online shopping mostly. And I love that, Alan. I love thinking about your brick and mortar as just a place to maybe go and have an extra experience. But really, the heart of it, you need to adapt to that e-commerce model somehow, some way. And those service-based businesses, I know that you're on the call and you're on the webinar too. There are ways for you to digitize some of your processes and sell digital products. And that's just, I leave you with that.
Yeah, I think it's a piece, those of us who are more comfortable with digital, I count myself among them, it doesn't seem scary, but I think the reality is there's some businesses out there that this is uncomfortable for them. And, Emily and Aram, I'm just wondering, since you guys are client facing, how do those businesses begin to overcome that? Or do you have thoughts and tools and tips? And so Emily, wanted to start with you. Emily,
I can jump in.
Emily, you might be on mute. Go ahead.
So I think increasing online communications with customers right now is obviously critical during COVID-19, but it's also a best practice when we go back into whatever in-person commerce is going to look like. I think a lot of businesses are reaching out and surveying their customers on things like type of safety protocols they'd like to see when they return. And I think smart companies will continue to view customer communication as a two-way street. So I think that that's going to be really, really important. But I also think authenticity and follow through matters. Whether you've always been online or you were brick and mortar and now going online more, don't make a big push about something like cleanliness if your company doesn't plan on continuing it or continuing that focus in a year or two. So I think that's going to be really important as these businesses are kind of going back online and offline, whatever that may look like.
That makes a lot of sense. Emily, are you back with us?
Yeah, sorry, the phone cut out for some reason. So
No
yeah,
worries.
sorry about that.
It happens.
Here we are in the digital age.
That's right. Did you want to offer any thoughts?
Was there, which part were we on in the question? There was a lot that was said that I'm happy to comment on, but I'm not sure where we're at.
I was just about to pivot actually to a conversation that I wanted to ask you and Aram to comment on, and so maybe I'll ask him to go first. But Aram, I'm curious, obviously, about NextGen Chamber and sort of the focus on sort of business owners under 40, and we actually know in the U.S. that most people start businesses are actually in the 50+ range, but I know because a number of factors, and historically one of the things we see when the economy is down is that younger people, a lot of people actually start businesses, and so I wonder how you're thinking about that, and how you're thinking about reaching sort of new populations of people who this sort of economic situation may force them to start a business, may force them to be more digital, and are you guys grappling with those issues at all?
I think like Margaret, who has been online, like she said, in the 10+ years she's been in business, very similar to my business model. We've already been online, and we've been doing a lot of our work online, and it's frankly saved on cost and I think work productivity for my team members on a larger scale. But I think what's happening now is millennials and Gen Zers, and the research that I've seen, are really leaning on each other as a support network to not only share experiences and best practices, but to figure out ways of continuing to be innovative and to have sounding boards with one another as to what works, what doesn't. And I also think that this population is not, because this population's parents in many ways are those baby boomers, especially for millennials, right? And so I think there is that desire to also help that generation, if there is an interest in a hand, to also become online, to be better stewards online, to really be successful. So my hope is that, not to use COVID-19 terminology, this herd mentality will really bring these groups together in order to make them more successful. And I think that's where a lot of this is moving from what I've seen.
How about you, Emily? Are you seeing anything generationally? I know you've done some work on Gen Z and.
Sure, and I want to also not mention it just for I'm a millennial, but not just my generation and the generation below me. But I think at a time of crisis, it sort of illuminates a lot that you may have already been thinking about in terms of your entrepreneur endeavors and interests. Meaning that, I mean, given how many people have been laid off or furloughed, it's sort of the impetus is now. This is a time where I can actually really take my side hustle and try to focus my attention on it. Or I'm realizing that my big time employer isn't really doing things the way I think they should be done, and they're much more rigid, or they're not changing in the way that I think they need to. So I think that's also what I've been seeing. For example, I have a client who did not obviously foresee COVID, but simultaneously was opening a business pretty much as this was all happening. But I think it was also just a building of factors that what was happening in her industry wasn't working for her. She thought she could do it better on her own. So I think it's just, this is a push that many maybe could have needed to fill areas of their industry that they see there's an opportunity. So I don't think that's simply, like you said, it's not just a generational thing, but we certainly know that millennials or Gen Zs are a lot more equipped to work in the digital space, period, and to make money simply online. So they're certainly at an advantage to do so, almost more so than an older entrepreneur might be who is doing things a little more traditionally.
Awesome. So we're getting a lot of questions in the box about actually what Aram said, which is what works and what doesn't. And I think some of this gets to, business owners understanding what they should measure and what they should be looking at. And Alan, I know, leaning on your previous experience, that you've actually built tools to help companies understand the return that they're getting from being digitally involved. And so I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts for folks on the line about when, if as they make the dive to go digital or as they get involved in digital, how should they be thinking about what matters and what doesn't?
Yeah, so these days when it comes to digital, there's sort of like two sides I like to really focus on, which is sort of like your audience side and your conversion side, right? Like conversion is, we have a product, here's how much it costs, buy it, try and optimize that experience, make it really great. And then the audience side is sort of everything around your brand, the people who are paying attention to you, and you really can't do one without the other anymore. So if you are selling, for example, omelet pants, right? Like the way you would market yourself is not just, oh, look, I have a website and I hope people land there on Google. Like that is like 2007's calling, they want their strategy back. What you would do instead is like you would actually build an audience around omelet recipes, videos, tutorials, all this stuff, so that people who are interested in that topic, they are finding you very organically and naturally, and then they are converting in a much more efficient way to your actual product. And so that's the thing I think for a lot of people is probably the hardest thing. Like I think the idea of like having an online store, and I'm using scare quotes that you can't see, having an online store feels like, okay, I get it. It's like a store, but it's online. But the issue is, versus when you have an online experience, people are going, they want to see the products, they want to talk to the people who are working there, they want to have an experience. Online, the equivalent version of that is having an audience that is actually getting content, getting value from you. And so you have to think about, how do I do that as a small business owner? And really what that's about is, either if you're a consumer product, think about what is your target consumer, what do they want to consume, right? And if you're a B2B product, it's really about education, right? So let's say you're in the professional services business, you're in accounting, like you should be creating online content about different accounting topics, how-to videos, all that kind of stuff. That's how you build an audience that ultimately then convert into whatever product you're selling.
That's super helpful. And as folks are thinking about that, Margaret, I'm wondering, and maybe Emily, you have some thoughts here too, living in sort of days of COVID, I mean, do we recognize COVID? Should that be like the thing we lead with, or is it later, or should we act like it's not happening? I mean, I think that is something, for a lot of businesses, they have to put in sneeze guards and think about all that. But for folks who are in more professional services or maybe more digitally based businesses, I think there's this constant question about like, oh man, I'm just so sick of hearing about COVID. So how are you thinking about that, and like how are you advising your small business clients?
I personally, I mean, you don't want to not, and someone already said this, you don't want to not talk about it, but at the same time, it's really annoying. It can be annoying, if I could just be really honest, if it's like the same old thing every time, the cliches. And like Aram said, if you're not going to continue doing certain things, then you probably don't act like you care if you're not going to care later. So I've actually talked to my clients about that as well. But as far as your marketing goes, I think a little bit goes a long way, because some of us have felt it, but we're not experiencing the worst of it. And so we do need to be really sensitive that people in our audience may have been let go, may have had, some terrible thing, may have had someone who is sick, who passed away. Like, so we don't, but at the same time, I think it's a breath of fresh air sometimes, depending on your service and your product, to come and just focus on something else.
Yeah.
So you just have to be careful.
So we're going to move to questions soon, and I'm going to invite Paul back into the conversation in a moment here. But before we do that, Emily and Aram, I wanted to give you a chance to weigh in on this. Did either of you have any thoughts about just, do we acknowledge COVID? How does that impact our communications and digital strategy as we're communicating outward to customers?
Totally, it's a very delicate balance, but I think a really important way to think about it is what's the kind of content that's resonating with you in all the ways that you're seeing it. So, what are you finding obnoxious, and what are you finding meaningful or fun or helpful or just distracting? Like, for example, I think we've been seeing a lot of like pet content. That's been a very popular thing I've at least seen, as kind of just something light and fun and not so serious. And that's just one particular thing. But I think it's foolish to not acknowledge it, given that that's the state that we're all in, and it is changing so frequently. So if you don't have something to say that's a little bit strange, it's like there should be some type of update that you should be providing on your business or your industry. But again, like I think it's interspersed. So I really, it's not, there's no one way to do it, but I really would start to look at like who's doing it well, whose stuff do you actually read, whose stuff do you think is fun and interesting, and like try to take some of that lightness, but also sensitivity in what you're putting out. Well, always, no matter what, I think all of us will agree, authenticity is the most important thing for social, no matter what. So.
Aram, did you want to add anything before we go to audience Q&A?
No, I think Margaret and Emily and Alan really laid it out really well. I echo a lot of their sentiments, and I think in the coming months, while this is still a reality for us, and until there's really a vaccine that they're talking about in the news cycle and within the medical community, this will still be top of mind for us. But I'm hopeful, and that's the optimist in me, that we as a small business community will be resilient to it, and we'll do our best to adapt, and we'll hopefully thrive, during and past this.
Sounds great. Paul, do you mind coming back and putting your camera back on and joining for the Q&A? I have some questions popping up about PayPal. I think the place I wanted to start was, it's interesting. I got a question both on the digital strategy side and on the payment side, which I think is the same question. But it's coming from a lot of people, which is like, where do I start? And so, Alan, could I ask you to take a stab at someone who's like digital strategy is just a foreign world to them? I think we've made the case, but where does someone start? And then Paul, maybe I'll ask you on the payment side, like for someone who's thinking about digital payments, like what's the 101? So Alan, over to you.
Yeah, so I think there's sort of a fundamental thing that is really important. Is like, so if you think about in the 90s, there was like, this whole thing where like old school businesses were like, look, we have a website, we're an e-commerce business, and Wall Street sort of bought that for a little bit and was like, actually, wait, you're not an e-commerce business, you're just a retail store with a website, right? And so that's what I think for a lot of people we have to avoid, is like, we don't want to be, we're a blank business with a website. So to fundamentally be an online business, right, I think you need to think about who are we selling to, how are we going to reach them, and where do they want to be reached, and making sure all of those things line up really well. And so if you are selling people, a software, for example, or if you're selling people, shoes, right? Where are the people that your shoes you want to get them to? Where are they consuming content? How do I reach them there? How do I build that audience, and how do I convert them? And so I obviously am very biased. I think books are a great place to start. And I think, even though he can sometimes maybe be a touch controversial, I actually think some of Gary Vaynerchuk has some really good books about like the Thank You Economy, for example, which is all about how small businesses should think about online. And he started his career on moving his family's wine business online. And so I think his story actually is like a really credible one. And I would suggest checking that out.
That's awesome. Paul, on the digital payment side, obviously people want to say PayPal is a great place to start, but I mean, do you guys have any tools and anything to help someone who's thinking about digital payments for the first time?
Yeah, absolutely. I will caveat my answer by saying, as a government relations person, I am by no means an expert on the issue, but we really do, in my opinion, have a really seamless onboarding process for our merchants. If you go to our website and you visit our merchant solutions, it's really straightforward in terms of being able to add a digital payments button to your website, but also adding our invoicing tool to be able to pay your vendors, to be able to pay for inventory. I think that our PayPal Commerce platform, which I mentioned at the start, has been a really interesting solution to make sure that everything comes together as one. Because I heard from a lot of small businesses in the past that they had the PayPal button, but they weren't sure, they weren't aware of the fact that we had a PayPal invoicing tool. And you really want to be able to have as many options as possible for your customers and for anybody that you're involved with as a small business owner, to make sure that everything is running seamlessly, and being able to have access to all of that is great. And just the final thing that I'll say on the digital payments piece is, it's allowed us to set up a platform for access to capital as well, which is a huge issue for small businesses. Our PayPal Working Capital product, which we launched a couple years ago, is structured in a way where you actually pay it back through a percentage of your sales through PayPal. So I think that one of the really unique things about right now is that it's allowed everybody to get really innovative with how they are adopting these solutions to their business. So definitely encourage folks to go out there, seek all the information possible, the other thing is, if you're confused about any of the setup or optimization strategies, don't be afraid to ask. I think everybody in this community is really willing to, help wherever possible.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to the next question I'm getting in the box. Thanks everyone for your questions. I'm trying to sort of aggregate them and see where I see common themes. And so Margaret, I wanted to go to you next about, someone's asking a question about digital payments and digital strategy. And they're basically saying, like, do I need professional help or can I do this on my own? I know that you had described your experience of going to digital payments and how it's been. I just, also being someone who works with small businesses to help them lift up their digital presence, how much of this can business owners do on their own, and when is the right time to get professional help?
I wish there was a blanket answer for that, but the thing is that small business is such a broad term, right? You have small businesses that are tiny micro businesses, and you also have mid-sized small businesses that still don't have a marketing arm. So this is where I would start as the business owner of whatever size small business you have. Start with what your goals are as a company, and then look at the bandwidth and your resources. So if you have a marketing budget, then I absolutely recommend that if you have no one else on your team that understands this, and don't lean on, oh, well, my neighbor said that he'd build me a Facebook page that can take PayPal payments, because that's just not the way you want to run your business. And the reason I say that is because I see it a lot. I see it a lot. And I know we try as small business owners to stay where we can, but when it comes to building your processes and your brand online, I know my colleagues would say the same. You want it to look good and you want it to work. And so starting with the goal in mind and then looking at your resources, that's where you start.
Helpful. Aram and Emily, I wanted to invite you into the conversation. I know you're both, obviously, Aram, you run a chamber. Emily, you're very involved with the chamber. I'm wondering, are those good places to start? What are you seeing business organizations and sort of trusted intermediaries doing in this moment to help folks go digital? Aram, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. With our organization, with the NextGen Chamber, we operate in terms of providing more support in the space from policy standpoint, talking about policy around 20 to 40-year-olds, and really working on making that connection between government and the small business community that are run by these 20 to 40-year-old individuals. I think that government connection, not to go too far, is important. And I think government needs to listen to what small business owners want even more, so that they can adapt, because they are such a massive both employer and service provider, if you will. I think that'll be a really critical conversation moving forward. There's also something called America's Small Business Development Centers that's through the SBA. I'm sure we can provide links and information at the end of this. I find, in having worked with many of them through some work that I've done, I find that many of those are also helpful, especially with business owners that are coming into this for the first time and really don't know what to do. So there's probably some good resources there. And I think also, from an online perspective, I think just a simple Google search sometimes about how to start a business, Business 101, there's so much free quality content online, whether it be on YouTube or other online learning programs that exist out there. I know it sounds elementary, but it really can make a difference. just the only caveat is don't look just to one source. Kind of broaden your search and look for multiple ways that you can educate yourself. And once you've gotten that information, share it with a small business owner, friend, or someone in the community that you trust, so that you can come up with a plan that makes sense for you. So that's how I'd respond to that.
Cool. And I want to get everyone out of here on time, and I wanted to give each panelist an opportunity for closing thoughts. So before we move to closing thoughts, Emily, just maybe quickly, like 30 seconds if you have anything on this.
Yes, because I do want to add to what each of them just said, because I thought they both were really good ends of the spectrum. But I just want to say every panelist here runs a business, and I'm assuming most people on this call either do or want to. And there are only so many hours in the day that we cannot do all of it. It is very overwhelming. There are a lot of different pieces to running a business, and I've had to kind of balance that myself. But my point is, if it's something you're good at and you enjoy, do it. Take all the free resources, spend your time, build your site if that's something that you love to do. If it's not, and you have some resources to commit to having an expert come in to do it. You can spend your time building business, dealing with your employees, doing a million other things that you could be doing. But if you have reinforcements available to you, I highly, highly recommend that you do it, because as Margaret said, people come to us all the time. My neighbor did it. My younger cousin did it. I got somebody to do it for free. And then you have to redo the whole process all over again for a variety of different digital channels, just overall. So I just want to add that there's so much free information. However, your time is limited. So if you can bring in someone to help you, I highly suggest that you do.
Awesome. So with that, I always like to leave people with like one tangible nugget. So I'm going to ask each of our speakers to like close us down with something that that our audience can take away. So Aram, can I start with you?
I will keep it short since I was a little long-winded before, but I really enjoyed this discussion. And I think for all of you out there, the COVID-19 pandemic has really given businesses an opportunity and a great reason to increase communication with their customers, with an audience that's much more captive than ever before, because they've been in their homes. So let's make the most of it and really do our best to thrive. So I leave you with that.
Margaret. On mute, maybe. All right, while Margaret's figuring out mute, Emily?
Oh, wow. Okay. I was hoping for a little time between mine. But I said it earlier, and it's just the thing that keeps coming to the top of my head, is that none of these things are going to be effective unless they really are true to you and your business and what you want it to be about. So I really think spending time to think about like what you want to represent is way more important before taking any of these steps. So, what you represent, what your value add is the question I would ask first before diving into any of these kind of digital avenues that you can use.
Awesome. Margaret, you back with us?
I'm back. 4 things. 1, thank you for having me. 2, everybody breathe. You will get through this. You will thrive, and you will get some digital components. I want to remind you to be wildly excited about the possibilities. It is my mantra. It's what I live by. And lastly, I believe the hosts can provide you with a checklist that I created for you to just to start your process.
Awesome. So I'm going to say it so Alan doesn't have to. Buy his book. And Alan, leave us with your words of wisdom.
Oh my God, well, that's my love language, so thank you. So, I think ultimately, whenever we think about sort of challenges, I have sort of 2 thoughts that come to mind and maybe see contradictory. I think on one hand, like we have to be okay with the fact that like this is not fun, right? And be willing to talk about that with our family, with our friends, with other business owner friends, because otherwise it's really hard to just keep it up, right? So I think that's one thought, right? Is like be okay with the fact that this sucks. The second thing is, now that we've agreed that it's not fun, what is sort of going forward? What are the resources we have? We're not going backwards. So think about the future and think about your mindset for that, and think about how can you take advantage of the changes to build your business. And I think the combination of being okay with the fact that this is terrible and also having the mindset of the future will hopefully help get us all through this.
Thanks, Alan. Paul, I'm going to ask you to wrap us up. Before I do that, I just want to remind folks that we have 2 more events. We may have a third. We have leadership managing your business in times of crisis. That's next Wednesday. So please join us. We'll send out a link to that when we send up the following materials. And then shortly coming will be an event focused on diversity business owners, which is such a critical part of our economy. So I want to thank everyone today. And Paul, did you want to share anything from the PayPal perspective as we sort of wrap up?
Yeah, so just thank you again to Small Business Roundtable for putting this together, and thanks to our great panelists for the discussion and the advice. I think that the one thing that I'll just add is, looking at it from the other side of things, working for, a large company, is that during this time, everybody's really come together to support small businesses in the best way possible. I really encourage everyone to go out there and look for, the resources that have become available to help you get set up and get through this crisis.
Awesome. With that, my thanks to everyone. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to PayPal. Thanks to Chris and Ashlyn on the SBR team. Our contact information is on the screen. Be well, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.